Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the football experience. I've got another new camera angle, slightly. It's a little bit off to the left, maybe you're right. A little bit eye height as well. So I've moved it down little bit.
Got leg room this week? Or you
Um,
kicking it over?
we'll see about that. I think I sort of felt it as I was. No, but the camera isn't on the light stand. It's on the laptop. So if I kick the light stand, hopefully it doesn't affect the camera.
There you go.
It'll only affect the lighting. So yeah,
We're
uh,
improving every week on this pod.
yeah. Look, baby steps, baby steps,
Thanks.
baby steps. Caleb, should we start off with the devastating news? I guess for both.
Devastating.
I guess for both of us, because City has become your rival, and now this season, City has become Arsenal's rival. So looks like they're creeping up on that title.
Well, who do you want to start with? Is it? I don't know.
We'll start with Arsenal because man, this is like if someone told me, like if someone started off with this sentence, like, "Oh, dude, you're gonna play Liverpool and West Ham, and in both of them you're gonna start off with a 2-goal lead," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, oh yeah," and then they're like, "But you end up drawing 2-2." It's like that. It's that Simpsons episode where it's like with the iced yogurt. It's like, but the iced yogurt is also cursed. it's like, so it's like, yes, it's like you start off all this. It's like, okay, we got a 2-0 lead. Oh, and then we blow both of them, man. The West Ham one, I'd say, was more down to us rather than West Ham actually like playing out of their skins. Because Liverpool, credit to them in that second half, they played like you would expect Liverpool to actually play, or like how you expected Liverpool to play for the entirety of the season, rather than in patches, like the Man United 7-0, the like Bournemouth 9-0 was this season as well.
Leeds 6-1 this morning.
Leeds
We're
6-1.
racking them up. We are the classic ketchup bottle team. It's just like, a big comes out and then nothing from him. Another big glob.
but like so, and then also in the West Ham game, and actually that's the other thing. In both games, we had chances to actually like seal it, to like make it 3-1, or in Liverpool one it was like 3-2 in like the 92nd or 93rd minute. I think we had like a breakaway 3-on-2 situation. In this West Ham one, we had more than enough chances to seal the deal. It just seems that now that's, I don't know if it's a little bit of, I think it's a little bit of a worrying thing that in both games, when we go up 2-0, instead of going the City or the Bayern Munich route of just like absolutely smashing them, putting away 4, 5, 6 goals in that window, it's like, okay, we've got 2 goals, let's defend this lead. It's like, for fuck's sake, like 2 goals is like, it's when you're playing away from home, they score 1 goal, and it's like they got the wind behind their backs, they got the crowd behind their backs, because once again, that West Ham crowd was dead at 2-0. Same with Liverpool, it was dead at 2-0, and
Well, they're in. Did you have something more?
no, that's pretty much it.
Therein, for me, lies where the problem has been the last 2 weeks. Arsenal have shot themselves in the foot in both occasions. Now, whether you want to say in the Anfield tie it was the Granit Xhaka incident, or whether you want to say it's the goal, I tend to believe it's a combination of both.
It's the combination, I'd say.
Yeah, because like you say, the place was dead, and the thing about that game was the Anfield crowd needed a reason to want to beat Arsenal, and in that moment, Xhaka gave it to us. And then you're kind of unlucky that the goal happens at the same time, or maybe it's not a coincidence. Whatever it is, this game it's the Thomas Partey, it's the getting robbed in midfield, and it's just shooting yourself in the foot. So this week at least, Well, I would say at least they're just as bad as each other. Last week it was an emotional mistake. This week it was a footballing mistake, and you haven't seen many of them from Arsenal, and you haven't seen many of them from Partey this season. To relinquish the lead is annoying, but what I would offer as a counter in terms of closing up shop or sitting on a 2-0 lead, Arsenal are a team who are very well positioned to do that when you think about the threats that they have on the counter attack. And I just think that sometimes it looks like sitting on something, but a lot of the time it would actually it's actually a good tactic for a team like that. If you're a good counter attacking team, why wouldn't
it's
you?
not. I don't think we are a good counter attacking team. I think
I think
we're.
you're a pretty good counter.
I don't think so. I reckon the moments that I've seen us play best is when we've like pressed them right into their box, and we've played.
Yeah, I don't.
We've played possession in the final third. That's when I've seen us play
Yeah,
best. Not playing
I definitely
defensively on
don't.
the back foot.
I don't dispute any of that. That's definitely when you play your best, but that is hard to maintain for a whole game. So if you get a chance to,
We
I
were
don't know.
doing it
I
though.
kind of see it.
We were doing
Huh?
that for a lot of games this season. We were doing that for almost like the entire 90 minutes. And now we
Yeah,
can
but
only
we're
do it for like a half.
Yeah, because we're game 30. We're playing
Yeah.
a long season, and that's what happens. So I kind of get it. Like, there's an opportunity here. Anfield, maybe I don't get. I especially don't get with the mistake they made. But, like, that's a place where if you can exact the most revenge possible, exact the most revenge possible. But, like you said, that was a lot of Liverpool playing well up to the crowd as well. This game, I kind of get it. You guys were cruising. I don't know what happened. And admittedly, I didn't watch the second half, but this game, the first 20 minutes, and it's interesting when we contrast this to City, but the first 20 minutes of Arsenal's performance at West Ham was perfect.
Yeah.
It was great. They were on the front foot. Tierney looked like Zinchenko. Players, Ben White was doing his overlapping thing he's made. I've been impressed with, Benjamin White this season in his improvement, because I think it's been very lineal, and we saw him probably at the start of the season be much more regimented in that sort of right back role where he's controlling the play and being ready to contain. But now he's overlapping more. I think in recent weeks he scored a goal a couple of weeks ago. I forget who it was against. Maybe he scored two in recent weeks. But he got
Bournemouth,
another
I think.
assist. Yeah, he got one against Bournemouth, and then he got another one the other
Leeds.
week. I can't remember.
Leeds, I think.
Yeah, but so his improvement, I think, has been really good in terms of what he does, and obviously you could see a bit of improvement with Tierney trying to play that Zinchenko role. And look, Arsenal looks like Arsenal for 25, 30 minutes, and I guess the game turns on the Partey losing the ball. I'm pretty sure it does ultimately, but I don't know. I don't know where it goes wrong here. And like I said, I didn't watch the second half, so. But yeah, it's just another week.
Saka had a penalty as well.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, well, so did he. It was very Salah-esque versus Bournemouth. It was pretty much a carbon copy of that, where he tries to place it high into his left hand side, places a little bit too wide, and that was at 2-1 that we had that penalty. So had he have scored that would make it 3-1, and that kills the game. Because we came out those first 10, 15 minutes before, like, we came out pretty much the same way that we came out at the very start of the game. But then after that, like after they scored their second goal, we just seemed flat. We've like the past these two games against Liverpool and West Ham, like the second half especially, we just seemed very flat and like almost scared to attack. Like it seems like we're playing like within a shell because we're trying to protect something. And I always have that belief, and this comes from when I was learning to drive, and like also things that I've heard, like when people talk about like defensive drivers are generally the most dangerous because they're, instead of being proactive, they're very reactive. So they're like, if something happens, they don't have that like automatic reaction. They wait a second for it to register and then they react, and then like and those drivers that generally drive very slow and cautiously, and then when you're scared to make a mistake, you end up making the fucking mistake. So, and it seems like we've gone into that recently. Like, we're trying to protect that lead at the top of the table, and by doing that, we're not playing to our full potential.
May I offer you, as someone who watches Arsenal so intently, of course, is it that they're trying to protect the lead in these games, the Premier League lead, or are they trying to protect a certain player that they've had to bring in recently because they don't have their best centre?
Rob
Is the
Holding, mate.
gameplay? Are they more conscious of
That
having to protect Rob Holding because they can't rely on William Saliba to
you
clean up
know
the
you
mess
know what
and be so proactive?
you know what that's another thing that I've noticed. Our build up from the back is not as fluid, and it's a little bit slower as well. The build up from the back. That's another thing that I've noticed. Whether we're trying to protect him or not, you don't have
Because
to.
you can't, for me, you can't trust Rob Holding to do the same.
He's a
job
lot
as
slower than
William Saliba.
Saliba. That is
Yeah,
true.
the physical prowess alone just means that you just can't do it. I don't think.
Yeah. No, that is a good point. But then also, like, Rob Holding isn't the one that's. I know he gave away the penalty against Liverpool, but he isn't the one that's making these glaring mistakes either.
Yeah.
So
That is the main point. That's
yeah.
definitely the main point.
But it sort of goes back to what I said a couple of weeks ago. Like, since he's your third choice centre back, potentially fourth because Tomiyasu can slot in there, Ben White can slot in there as well. Like, depending on how you rotate it all. You wouldn't rely on a centre back like that for the whole of the season, the whole 38 games. You rely on him to give someone a rest. So, like, 5 to 10 games.
Eddie and Kedia role.
Yeah, 5 to 10 games, not throughout the league. 5 to 10 games throughout the whole season. So that includes Europa League, FA Cup. So he comes in those games as well to give like Saliba or whoever a rest. But now he's being relied upon as the main guy or the second guy because Gabriel is the main centre back now.
So where are we now? Are we worried?
It's difficult because, like, all right. So it's not like we're not scoring goals. The game plan or the way we're playing hasn't changed that dramatically. What's changed is that when we go ahead, we go into a shell. That seems to be the mentality that I picked up on recently, and that's 2 away games that we've done that. At home, we don't seem to do that, and I guess that's because we have the crowd behind us and whatnot. But yeah, like, if we can stop that, then I can see us winning the league. But it's gonna, and some other pundits have the same thought process as me, as that it's not going to be the City game that's going to be the killer. It's going to be the Newcastle game.
Could be a combination of the two.
Could be.
Or they could be the making games though, because I don't know. Am I worried for Arsenal? I'm maybe annoyed of the last 2 weeks that they had such a good chance in both games to capitalise and they don't. I am worried for the reason that we'll get to after we're done with Arsenal on the other side of who is chasing them now. I am a little bit worried about that. I'm not worried about the way they're playing.
No, definitely not.
They definitely have to tighten up on these stupid errors that they've made the last 2 weeks, but I think they're so glaring you can trust them to tighten up on them. But those, like we saw, I thought their start at Anfield was great, and the start at West Ham was probably even better. They looked like Arsenal. So the level of play is still there. It's not like they're sputtering in terms of that. They maybe are. Am I worried on energy levels? Perhaps because of what you've outlined.
But we shouldn't be, because we're not playing midweek games.
But that's the thing. It's I guess when you lay it out like that, it's the energy levels that are related to the mentality and the psychological aspect of the situation of
Mm.
trying to defend a lead, of being in a position you didn't think you'd be in, trying to fend off a team who have chased this down before. They've been in this exact position before, and now a team who are actually have entered the conversation in terms of how they play football, because we saw it. We saw it against Leicester for the first 10 minutes. I thought it was one of the most impressive 10-minute spells. It was reminiscent of an Arsenal display for those 10 minutes against Leicester at the start. And I know probably in both cases, in West Ham and Leicester, both teams sort of let the opposition do that, but at the same time, I thought both teams were pretty outstanding. So performance levels are there. I don't rule them out of even winning the game at the Etihad, to be quite honest. I
Yeah,
think
I
they're
don't
that
either.
good a team. Yeah, there's no way you can rule them out of that. I don't know what the updates are on Saliba.
Mm.
You're gonna hope that he's ready for. Is that this weekend?
I think it's next weekend.
Oh yeah, it's the FA Cup semi-finals this weekend.
Yeah,
So yeah,
but
so you get an extra week, which is great. Yeah.
I don't know if do you have much more to add in regards to Arsenal and whatnot?
No, I think that's all aspects of things that where either you can be worried about or not worried about. On the whole, I think the whole mood is not worried, but yeah, now it's come to a point where they've lost that lead, so it is make or break against City and Newcastle.
You know, when you look back at seasons and like there's the defining moments where the tide shifts. And I don't want to bring up bad memories for you, but what was that one was it 2017, 2018, where Company scored that 30-yard screamer? Or was that
18-19, yeah.
18-19? Yeah. That was that was the moment where I said, even with like 5 games left, I'm like, City's winning the title.
Yeah, yeah,
That
that
moment.
was the moment we knew it, but that
Even though,
one actually shifted on.
but the thing is, that game, like, you guys were still like level on points or like 1 point behind. But like that, it was that
Yeah, we're a point
moment
behind, I think.
because it was no, it was against Leicester, not Everton.
Yeah, less.
Yeah, but like it was like what 75, 80 minutes. They could not break through, and then your captain comes up with that. It's like, okay, that's the killer moment. This penalty missed by Saka. It's reminiscent of that, but like in a different way, like in the opposite way. So it could, like, if we look back at the end of the season, if we don't end up winning the title, there's a couple of moments, but this could be the defining moment where it's a shifting of the tide and the mentality.
Am I? Sorry, you got me thinking about that 18-19 season, man. You killed me
Yeah.
with that
Well,
one.
look, like I
That one-
might be having my own 18-19 season after that. But what happened?
Well, the worst.
What happened with Liverpool after that season? They go on what 22-game unbeaten run, romp to the title.
The worst thing about your moment is that Saka actually had it in his hands to affect that situation, whereas we don't have it in our hands to affect the company situation. But that title, I thought, to digress for a moment, that title 100% came down to the meeting at the Etihad that we lost 2-1. And that was the only game we lost all season. So it basically was both teams were setting such an incredible pace that it was just like you can't lose the head-to-head meeting, and we did, and we didn't win the home one. So that killed us at the end of that season. But anyway, we digress. So the Saka moment, that it leads me to an interesting question about, and it will probably lead us to City as well. Will your opinion change of any Arsenal players or this Arsenal team if they don't see this out and don't win the title?
No, because I know that as seasons progress, expectations change, and like the goals of the team may change. Like, for instance, look at Aston Villa. They're potentially chasing top four now, based on their form. Brighton, would they have seen themselves chasing a European, maybe a European spot? But at one point, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we'll talk about them making top four potentially. Newcastle, again, top four. I don't think anyone expected them to be top four, but maybe chasing that 6th, 7th spot to get Europe. Arsenal, the expectation was always third or fourth get Champions League. That was always the expectation. Obviously, we've overachieved, and I guess like expectations or can change based on your performances. Like for instance, did anyone expect West Ham to be in a relegation battle this season? So obviously the expectations changed for them in the opposite manner, where it's like last year it's like, okay, let's try and build on what we have from last year. Let's try and go for top four. And now it's like, oh shit, we're fighting to survive. So in regards to Arsenal, because the team is also so young as well, like the majority of the team is still 22, 23. I think if next season we find ourselves in this position, then I'll start to be a little bit disappointed. This season, I will be disappointed because, like, you know, we were there. If we don't end up winning, like, we were there, we were very close. But ultimately, I think this team, if we don't end up winning it, I think it just might be a season too soon in regards to winning the title.
Yeah, and you don't. The difficult thing is you don't know what happens from season to season.
Yeah.
But obviously, tying down Saka to the new contract. Did they get Saliba sorted?
I don't know if they got Saliba sorted. They got Martinelli sorted. They got Saka sorted.
Yeah, so you got to think Saliba will be the next domino to fall there, and if you can lock those guys down, then there's no reason to concern, and that's why I land on the same spot as you in terms of opinion. Definitely not changing with Arsenal, and why it transitions over to City for me is because I probably think in all of Europe, out of all the teams, City are the only team that can still change my opinion of them. And this weekend they went a long way to it. I know it's just Leicester. I know it's at the Etihad, but I was just so happy to see John Stones just play as a centre back. He didn't go into midfield. He just played as a centre back. He played the ball. He kept it moving. He was really good in this game again. Like, I'm not saying he hasn't been good in the games where he's played central midfield, but I still think there's a reason to trap that if you're an opposition. But in this game, he just played centre back, and he got his reward with an unbelievable left foot on the turn, half volley into the corner. It was just ridiculous. It's like, I know after all the things I've said about John Stones not being that central midfielder, I know that was going to come back to haunt me. It's not what I'm really saying. I'm not saying he's not a good player. I'm just saying he's not a central midfielder. But whatever, that's the
Yeah, like it's like any player. Like if they're played out of position, they can look worse than what they actually are. But like as a player, like technically, they're fine if they're played in their own position. Like Van Dijk, I don't think he'd be that good as a defensive mid.
No, John Stones is undoubtedly better than Van Dijk would be in midfield. That's for sure. But yeah, no. I thought City were really good in this game. Even Kyle Walker came back and played right back. So the team just made sense. They have such good players everywhere. They look motivated again. The other change as well, the big notable changes, and this has been recent weeks, the intensity they play with, the pressure they put on the ball, the pressing game has been good. They now, in this game against Leicester, what I was impressed with, apart from Stones, was that intensity and that willingness to just play forward and play balls into Haaland or in and around the box, and always look to just try things. And then because they have this intensity back, they can play off second balls. And last season, I remember mentioning it as well. I wasn't stunned, but I was a bit surprised by how many crosses they were putting into the box, considering they played with no recognised striker. And it was all to unbalance the opposition so that they could play off the second balls. But what you always need with that is a great intensity. You need to be playing at a great speed and just that frenetic intensity to win those second balls and then play off there. And I think the scary thing is for Europe and for Arsenal is that they seem to have got that back. And if they have that back, I think the quality of players and the quality of coaching that you have at that team, man, that's the story for this season. And I don't know, they don't have to win the treble to change my opinion. I think that's setting the bar a little bit too high, but they have a really good chance to win the treble. But they have to win one of the big ones. They have to win the Premier League or the Champions League, and then they have to continue to play as they have been, because the reason they can change my opinion is because I haven't thought very highly of them to this point, because they were fantastic to start the season and then they left us very cold in the middle part of the season. But now they look like they could get back to that level at the start of the season. And then it would make me question, has this all been a rope-a-dope? Has this been a pep masterclass in terms of managing motivation levels, managing energy levels with these players, considering they're a squad who had, I think, the equal most players go to the World Cup along with Real Madrid. So to have to manage that, to have to manage the media as Pep has, and he's gone full Ferguson on us this season. So if that all comes sort of to a crescendo at the end of this season, with them playing swashbuckling football and romping to a Premier League title, or being able to overcome Bayern Munich, which it looks like they will, and then probably Real Madrid in the semis, and whoever they have to meet in the final, and winning that competition, then yeah, I think it will change my view of them from what I have had in this middle part of the season, I got to say, because at the start of the season we were pretty high on Man City as well. So they're starting to get back to that. They're probably the only team that I have this kind of storyline around, really. Obviously, there's other storylines around other teams, but none that will change my opinion of what I thought they did this season, really.
Yeah, they, like you said, they're starting to get back to that level that they started the season with, like those first 10, 12 games, because they started to fall off 2, 3, 4 games before the World Cup. And that's another thing I'll mention as well. Like City now, that there is also a little bit of element of luck as well, because do they have any players injured?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Like they did have injuries, I think, to Foden at the start of January. I think Walker is coming back. So like they players that were injured, that were injured early enough to start coming back now. Whereas like sort of to contrast with Arsenal, like Saliba's out now. I don't know when he's coming back. Tomiyasu has a season-ending injury. I'm gonna throw El Neni in there just because it did make us go and get Jorginho, but like it's still an injury. Like he would have filled in maybe for a Europa League game or two, and then Nketiah as well, and he got injured for like 5 or 6 games. So like that's also interesting. Like if you throw in that little bit of the element of luck in terms of injuries, City seems to be. That's also credit to their physios and whatnot, managing, the stress of the muscles and the bodies and everything, that so that then they're not being overworked, and they're not having like those like repetitive strain injuries or something like that. So if they do have an injury, it's like from a serious tackle or something like that, rather than from being overworked.
Yeah, and they should, in terms of that sort of stuff, they should be cutting edge. I think all these top.
I think all the
cutting
top
edge.
teams would be.
Yeah. In terms of that, so I don't really focus on that. I think, without knowing the ins and outs of the science, obviously, I think it is a lot of luck what that comes down to. Even muscular injuries, yes, you can manage them, but you never want to get to a point where it's over managed or anything. You've just got to. I think you just got to trust the players that that what they feel in their body. Some have a higher tolerance to pain than others. Anyway, that's a tangent, but yeah, I think
it's actually an interesting tangent. I've always liked the sort of the sports science behind it, because to sort of continue on that tangent, do you remember the Last Dance documentary? Jordan had a personal physio, and he would actually, in every single game, he would actually count the steps on his left and right leg to see how much each leg was being overworked. And that was back in the 90s. And like now you can actually like wear like monitors like in your boots and stuff like that, and now they wear heart rate monitors while they're playing, so they can see when a player is overworked, and they can see it. The technology is so good now that they can actually predict, like with pretty much 100% certainty, when a person or a player or whatever is going to come down with a cold. That's like how how far the technology's gotten.
Crazy.
It's fascinating stuff. Fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I don't know which side. I don't want to. I'm not a big science guy. Like I
Doesn't
get that it's
believe in science.
there.
He's a science denier.
No. I'm not saying I don't believe in it, but I'm just saying I think a lot of it is the psychology. Like if a player believes that all of that stuff is working, if they believe that the physios are telling them you need to take a break, then they'll believe that and they'll go with it, and then this whole psyche around it is changed. And if you tell them they're hurt, then they might believe that they're hurt. So I don't know. Back in the day, it seemed like players just played every game and they sort of got on with it. I know the intensity wasn't the same as it is nowadays, but I got to think a lot of that is mentality based. The fact that, you know what, like if I'm a little bit hurt, I'm just going to keep playing because that's like kind of what my job is. So I don't know. It doesn't need to be barbaric or anything like that, but football, I don't think football's been too affected, to be fair, but basketball has been affected terribly by load management. Like, you watch so many games during the season and just no one's playing.
But how does that work though? Because like, for instance, Jordan would play all 82 games, like, or like maybe like 75 games.
That's what I'm saying.
So like, how does
the mentality, the psyche around it?
And the thing is, if you think about it a little bit, weren't players actually getting more contact because they were driving to the rim a lot more and getting inside the paint, whereas now they're jacking up threes.
Yeah, here's the difference with that, and is like the difference you'll see it in football as well from the day. The contact is more, yes, but the intensity is not the same. So what we're seeing now is a lot of really bad like ACL injuries, for example, or those ligament injuries, those ankles. Like everything's done at such a speed that you don't want that much contact nowadays. That's for sure. Because especially in basketball, you're running on that hard court. You're doing everything at such a speed. You're running so much more than you did back in that day. You got to think that's got to take a wear and tear on your joints, your ligaments, your back, everything. Like, especially when these guys are so tall as they are. So, I definitely think the intensity of sports in general, not just basketball, has led to those kinds of injuries occurring more. But yeah, definitely that's the pros and cons thing. Because back in the day, yes, you got more contact. But contact was, I guess that's the point as well. Contact is definitely a pain tolerance thing. You can play through that. You can play the next game with like bruises and stuff. That is what it is. Whereas maybe the injuries that are being suffered now are more, I don't know, detrimental to play. I don't know. It's a hard one to land on. It as all complex sort of issues like that. I definitely think the answer is somewhere in the middle. You just got to decide where in the middle it is.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. We should get our good friend Dr. Nick on the pod to discuss it all.
Hi everybody.
Hang on, give me 1 second. I need to turn the oven off. Like it's one of those electric ones, so it flew over my head. Man, I was wondering why it was so hot, and like because it was just it was just emanating heat, and like the kitchen's small, so it's like the oven is enough to heat up the kitchen.
Oh, that's good. That European feel.
Yeah, and they don't really have the heating going, so whatever. Let's just quickly touch on the other results. Our boys in black and white, they dropped points to the team that I mentioned earlier, Aston Villa, who's like right behind chasing them.
You've been on Villa.
Well, in recent time, once I got alerted to it, like 2 weeks ago or a week ago, I'm like, okay, well, this is an interesting story. Tottenham lost at home to Bournemouth. And United are back in third with a 3-point lead over Newcastle. So, and your boys won 6-1. But I think with the results that you guys have had over the past couple of weeks, I think it's just a little bit. I know mathematically you guys can still make top 4, but you're 9 points behind fourth, whereas like Aston Villa are 6 points, although they have a game more than Newcastle.
It was a great result for Villa. It was a great sort of showcase performance of what they've been doing in recent weeks. They finally got to show it off against the team that came in third in the table. I will say Newcastle did not show up for this game. They were abject at best. They're going to need to find if they are dropping off. Maybe this was just a bad day. You'd suggest it is just a bad day because of what they've done in recent weeks. It was a really bad day. I'd say that this would. Well, they conceded 3 against City at home as well, but they definitely haven't conceded more than 3 in the league this season. Yeah, Villa put them to the sword with that sort of 4 central midfielder um, midfield sort of block that they just swamped Bruno Guimaraes in the middle, and they sort of used Newcastle's biggest strength as their biggest weakness in the game, and
Yeah, because doesn't
they
it
couldn't touch
sometimes?
him.
Sorry to cut you off, but doesn't it sometimes feel like Guimaraes is there in the middle on his own?
Sometimes they do clear that midfield
It
for
sometimes
sure.
feels like that he's just running that entire block up until the wings by himself. That like when I've watched them, I'm like, where's the other central midfielder? That sometimes I'm asking myself that.
That is very important because I think a lot of good teams are doing that in more recent times. I think the first time I probably noticed it was with City in their Centurion season where they got De Bruyne and I guess it was Gundogan on the other side, but they were always making those runs into the channel, so it was always just Fernandinho who had to hold the midfield, and that's why it's so important that you have a physical presence. And I don't think Guimaraes quite has that. Like, I trust a Casemiro, obviously. I trust a Thomas Partey to. Well, Arsenal do it to that point. They do. I think the difference is Arsenal bring the fullbacks just a little closer to the central midfielder, whereas Newcastle. Trippier can definitely do it, but you don't really want Dan Burn picking up the ball in those sort of central areas, so they leave him a bit wider. But yeah, Guimaraes is somewhere sort of in between a 6 and an 8. I think I'd prefer him as an out and out 8, where he maybe had a more physical presence next to him. Maybe like a Locatelli, Brian Cristante mold, that type of player. But yeah, I think because of the way they play, and to your point, the way they let Guimaraes patrol that square, and for the most part, he wins the battles and he dictates the pace of the play and he dictates the game in there. In this game, he couldn't because Villa just swamped him. They had way too many players around him. And then the central midfielders didn't get back in time to help him enough. And yeah, Newcastle were just not defensively solid in this game either. They were a bit lax in that department as well. And yeah, just probably their worst performance of the season. And yeah, a great time for Villa to showcase what they can do. But ultimately, I think in the top 4 race, it's going to be a bridge too far, considering I think they're still 6 points off Newcastle, and Newcastle have a game in hand on them. So, but I guess Newcastle will have a couple of tricky fixtures. We know they have
They
Arsenal on the
Yeah, they
on the
have Arsenal
horizon.
and they have
So
Tottenham as well, don't they? That we talked about.
yes, of course. So,
Yeah.
but I would look. They could lose both of them, and then maybe Villa are back in it. But at the moment, I would cut it off at Brighton. I think Brighton go into the bridge and talk about dominating Chelsea. My God, they killed them. They crushed them. You can only shudder to think what Real Madrid might do to them in the midweek because, yeah, Brighton were way too good for Chelsea in this game. And it was only 2-1. Probably could have been 3-0, 4-0 in this game. Brighton were that much better than them. And yeah, I think they still have an outside chance. Tottenham, as we said, the loss of Bournemouth is terrible for them, and it leads to Manchester United being the big winners of this weekend because if you said Newcastle were nailed on last week, well, you've got to go with the same logic and say Manchester United are nailed on after the weekend that they were able to have, and other teams being quite poor around them. And while Man United have lost, obviously, their centre backs, and that's cause for concern, but they did have their full strength midfield back in this game. And yeah, I only watched the mini match, but from what I saw, they were dominant. They were pretty good. Martial looked good. Anthony looked good. And I guess Rashford didn't even play in the game. So if they can win games without their main man up front, perfect. Because I guess the trade off is, yeah, you've lost your defense, which is bad because they were a very good partnership, a very good defense this season, apart from some aberrations. But you've got your midfield back, so you can control games and you can create chances. And Yeah, the amount of chances it looks like they created looks very good. So they look pretty much nailed on for that top four. I would say
Hmm.
8 weeks left. We'll
Yeah,
see.
it's gonna be
Enough,
interesting.
enough time, enough time. It did open up a bit this weekend, though. That's for sure. The
Yeah.
Spurs will be kicking themselves. My goodness.
Oh man, but like, oh man, I still can't believe how bad Chelsea still are.
Oh, ooh, man,
Oh man.
terrible.
Oh,
At
like
least Mudryk looked half decent at the start of the
yeah,
game.
he picked the wrong London club to go to. You know what? Like, you know how there's certain players where like, yeah, I don't. I'm trying to look back in history, but like, obviously the most recent one is like, I don't think Mudryk. I I, I said it at the time. Arsenal's system, I believe, would have allowed Mudryk to thrive more. And you know how there's those certain big signings where a player he picks one team over another team, and like the style of the team that he didn't pick actually would have suited him more than the style of the team that he did pick. But like this is the most recent one. I'm drawing blanks here, but I know that there's been other ones where like a player just has like failed at a club, or like for instance, De Bruyne and Salah at Chelsea.
Well, what about João Felix? Wait, that's João Felix everywhere, isn't it? Oh man, I won't hear a João Felix defense anymore.
See that
He
that's
does nothing. He looks good doing nothing. I'll give you that. He looks pretty when he does nothing. But for the second Brighton goal, Frank Lampard I think only brought him on 2 minutes before. If I was the manager, I would have taken him straight off after I saw what happened, because there was the first instance where he dribbled into a dead end and then sort of lost the ball and then sort of didn't react, didn't go and counter press. Then Brighton gave the ball away, and then he had another chance. It ricocheted or it was passed, sort of in his direction, and he just let Estupinian just run past him to get the ball, and that's opened up the whole midfield and opened up the second goal. And if I as his manager saw that, if I was Diego Simeone, and that's why he is no longer at Atletico and will no longer be Atletico, because thank God Diego Simeone won that battle against him, because it would have been tragic if Atletico chose João Felix over Diego Simeone. But yeah, I don't know where he goes to next, because if I was a big club in Europe, I would maybe Juve. I think Juve maybe makes the most sense in terms of Di Maria might not be there next season, or he'll have to take a lesser role given his age. He's been really important to them this season, but I wouldn't do it if I was Juve, because this guy flatters to deceive. He doesn't produce. There's no output to his game. He looks fine, and he's
see.
like he can produce these moments that look beautiful, but there's no goals. There's not enough assists. There's not enough effort, desire, and there's too much petulance there. So
But see
yeah,
that's the thing. Like that he was another one that was rumored to potentially come to Arsenal, and I think the way that Arsenal is right now, and like the hard. I know that Simeone is probably also another hard styled coach, like Arteta seems to be, like a no nonsense coach. But like with the right coaching and the right system, and like considering he's only what 22, 23 as well. It's not like he's
what
28.
price? What price would you pay for him to have him at Arsenal?
So that's the thing. Atletico would have to take a big discount.
They're gonna have to. Either
40?
way.
40? They paid 100, didn't they, for him? Or did they pay like,
Don't bring that
or
up.
did they pay 130? I'm pretty sure it
Yeah, I
was
think it was
over
like
100.
110 euros
Yeah,
or something, or maybe pounds. I don't even. It was obscene.
yeah, it was
Obscene.
over 100. But see, that's the thing. Like, it, I'd take him for 40.
Okay,
And
say
that's the thing.
how much do
Like,
you think Arsenal have in the bank?
considering we're gonna make we're gonna get into the Champions League. Um, I'd say we have a 150 mil kitty.
Isn't that one Declan Rice? Maybe a bit
Yeah.
less now that his contract has run down another
Yeah,
year.
I don't think he's gonna be 100. He's probably gonna be like 60 to 80, I reckon.
I reckon 80,
It
given that
dep-
he's at another
but it
Premier League
dep-
club.
but it depends. It depends whether West Ham are willing to let him go on a free. If they're like, nah, fuck it, we're going to keep you for another season. Have like
I'd be
a last dance
amazed.
sort of thing. So
I'd be
I'd
amazed
if they took
if
nothing, I'd be
A, Declan
amazed.
Rice didn't ask to go, and B, if West Ham was so petty if he did that they would hold him sort of captive. But don't get me wrong, they'll ask for a price.
But see that's
So
the
that's
other.
why I think it'll be 80 to
But you
85
know
maybe
what?
for him.
There's going to be quite a lot of clubs coming in for him. Like I imagine that Liverpool's going to have make a bid. They'd be foolish not to. Like
But I don't think he'd be that much cheaper than Jude Bellingham, and Liverpool ruled out
that,
themselves out of Jude
but my
Bellingham because
point,
of the
but my point
price.
is that you know when it's essentially an auction, and when you have multiple bidders, the price gets driven up. For instance, Chelsea had Arsenal not have been in for Mudryk, I don't think they would have paid what was it 90 mil or something. They probably would have paid like maybe 60 or 70 maybe. Or the opposite, if Chelsea wasn't in for him, then and it was only Arsenal. But like Rice, Arsenal's going to go for it. Liverpool's going to go for it. Man United, I reckon, will go for it. And Chelsea might even go for it because wasn't he at Chelsea's academy like as a 10-year-old or something as well?
I think it would make sense for all of those clubs.
Yeah, so you're going to have 4 clubs coming in for him. So West Ham can be like, okay, you're offering us 6, like, oh, Arsenal, you're offering us 60. They go and tell Liverpool, look, how about 65? Liverpool, like, okay. And then they go to Chelsea, how about 70? And they're like, okay. And then,
oh, it's a bit
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's going to be a difficult one in regards to that. Maybe they do get 80 then, because there's so many clubs in for them.
Yeah, I think I'd be shocked if it's less than 80, given the Premier League tax as well. I would be very surprised by that. So, yeah, so I think the point is you wouldn't touch João Felix for 40 mil if you've got priorities elsewhere. If I was Arsenal, I'd be like 25 max. But I know Atletico won't take that.
Nah, they're not taking
that's
25.
That's as much as I'd be willing to give for him because I don't think he's worth any more than that.
Atletico they might do 25 plus 15 in installments, like 15 over the next year or two. Maybe
they'll.
I imagine that they'd accept something like that.
They'll see what comes in the summer, but I don't think he'll be long for Atletico, given how well they are doing with Simeone turning it around. Does that, I guess, give us a transition into Europe?
Yeah, you can give us your quick little European wrap before we just give a little mini preview to the Champions League, since we've talked about Champions League for enough last week.
Yeah. I don't think there'll be. This was a grueling week of football, man. I resorted to watching a lot of mini matches, skimming through a lot of games. I don't know, and that sort of goes to the point that I am at a point in the season where my opinion of these teams is formed, and I'm not seeing anything too different. What I am seeing, though, was a few clubs, particularly in Italy, you saw where their priorities were lying. AC Milan named a team that did not have one sort of starter outfield player in the team. It just had Mike Mignon, and that was the only player you would expect to see play against Napoli in the midweek. And Bologna would have to be super disappointed that they weren't able to. Because I think if they won that game, they probably were on the outskirts of challenging for the top 4. I think they'd be above Juve in the table because Juve went to Sassuolo and lost, and they rested a few players for their Europa League second leg tie, but they definitely named a stronger lineup than Milan. So did Inter. They named probably a comparable lineup to Juve in terms of how many starting 11 players and how many sort of players they wanted to rest. And both teams, they lost. Inter lost at home to Monza.
Yeah.
Which, man, I have no idea what to make of Inter in the league. They look really good in the Champions League, really solid, a really good team. And then in the league, they can't ever get the job done. They've lost 11 games now. They are outside looking in of the top 4. And it increasingly looks like, because, like I said last week, this weekend went exactly the same way, in that Rome were the big winners. The city of Rome were the big winners in terms of what happened in football in Italy. Mm-hmm. Because I think Roma now have a 5-point gap on Inter.
Yep.
And Lazio have a staggering 10-point gap on Inter, so you've got to think that Lazio are nailed on
Yeah,
to
they
finish
should
at
be.
least top four, if not, they're pretty much nailed on to finish second. But Roma are the surprise packet for me, who are now in a great position to finish in the top four. And it really does look like only one Milan club, maximum, will get into the competition next season unless one of them finishes fourth and the other one wins the whole thing. So we still have that sort of possibility. Atalanta, I'm disappointed in them, but they were playing Fiorentina away, and Fiorentina have been fantastic in the second half of the season. So did I expect them to win? They did have a 1-goal lead. They could have won the game. Sort of a little bit annoying handball decision given against them. But I am annoyed because if Atalanta put themselves above Inter, which I think they would have gone on goal difference had they won that game at Fiorentina, then we could have had a situation where maybe Milan prioritizing the Champions League as they've shown that they did this week, maybe they fall out of the top four, maybe Atalanta in, but we could have had a situation where we got a Milan derby in the semi-finals of the Champions League. And not only was it big just for that occasion, it could have been big for the fact that these teams need to win the competition to qualify for the thing again next season. So we're still not past that, but Juve and Atalanta losing their games helps them massively, given that Milan somehow drew against Bologna. I don't know. Bologna will be so disappointed not to win that, and Inter lost at home to Monza. So, man, I don't think anyone wants it, but the city of Rome wants it, and they're in a great position with both their clubs. And I'm gonna say I'm pretty happy for Lazio because I've been they're one of the teams I've been most impressed by, given where I thought they'd be start of the season. I thought they'd maybe be fifth or sixth. And the fact that they are now the second best team in Italy, even if Juve get their appeal overturned, and they've cut that gap to 14 points. So watch out, Napoli. They're coming for you. No, not really, but
Nah.
Napoli didn't win again. But at least Victor Osimhen played in the game. Hit the crossbar,
Yeah, he
right
got
at the
like 10,
crossbar.
15 minutes, didn't he?
Yeah, so it was
Yeah.
good to see him come out, and hopefully he is fit for that quarterfinal second leg. But yeah, that's what happened in Italy and Spain.
That's
I mean,
tonight,
the
isn't
best
it?
derby, Champions League.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's
Yeah,
tonight.
tomorrow morning. Yeah, of course for us tomorrow morning
The
tonight for
Napoli
you.
game is tonight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. That's the D1, which I guess we'll come around to
Later
when
on.
we do it.
A little bit
But
later on.
yeah, a little bit, not too much.
Yeah.
Spain, the best derby is always fun because it's a derby. Did actually felt like a throwback derby. Athletic Bilbao against Real Sociedad, and Sociedad continued their sort of indifferent form in the second half of the season. Uh, and they slipped up and they lost. And I guess this game made me more disappointed that we haven't seen that Bilbao more often this season because they played at a really high intensity. Oyan Sunset played really well. He signed a contract until I think 2032 the other week. So anyone who was hoping to maybe take a really good central midfielder from Bilbao might need to think again. He does have an 80 million release clause in there, so if he continues on this trajectory, he might be worth it by next season because he has, for me, been Bilbao's best player this season, and probably in terms of a goal scoring midfielder, one of the better ones in Europe for sure. So he's been impressive. Nico Williams is still, I think, a player who some clubs will look at, given that he's only, I think, 20 years old. He's a live wire. So, yeah, Bilbao were impressive in this game, but disappointing in the fact that they haven't been that for a while, and they haven't been a team challenger for the top four. Sociedad remain in pole position, but only 3 points above Betis, who were able to win and look really good in winning, actually. I watched the mini match against Almeria.
Espanyol.
Um, Espanol, yeah. But they, with no Sergio Canales, William Carvalho was pulling the strings. Luis Enrique, the winger, not the manager, looked really good in this game because it's Enrique, not Enrique. Yeah, but Betis, like, and another sort of sort of impressive but disappointing performance in why can't you look this threatening in more games? So, but they close the gap somewhat, and Villarreal, my, what are they doing? They lose 2-0, I believe, 2-1, 2-0 against Valladolid at home. Anyway, a terrible loss.
Yeah, 2-1.
Villarreal were another team. Yeah, Villarreal were another team who were on the sort of have I formed my opinion. I think this weekend I have formed my opinion about Villarreal. This was sort of their Liverpool Bournemouth moment where before that game against Bournemouth for Liverpool, I'm like, they just beat Manchester United 7-0. Villarreal had just beaten Real Madrid at the Bernabeu. It's like, all right, I'm ready to get behind this push for top four, and then they go and lay the eggs that they both did in those games. So yeah, I've made my mind up on Villarreal. They're not very good because of the lack of consistency. I still trust Sociedad to see out the job, but who knows if Betis have this sort of creation in them going forward, they might be able to push it all the way. Um, as for what happened above them, is there really much to say? I haven't watched Barcelona in weeks. They draw again 0-0. This season has a chance to fizzle out for Barcelona. Like they're not going to get the airtime that maybe they deserve for being champions because they're now in no other competition. So what are we going to talk about in terms of Barcelona? The only thing they have left to go for is that 100 points, and now they need to be perfect to get there. So, but they still haven't even conceded double figures of goals in the league, which is incredible. And yeah, Real Madrid maintain that 2-point gap as both the Madrid clubs win this weekend, and yeah, that is probably the thing I'm looking forward to most to see which Madrid club finishes above
Do
the other.
they still need to play each other or no?
No, I think they've played each other twice this season already.
Atletico still have Barca.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't look like they. Yeah, they've already played each other twice.
Yeah, I'm
Damn.
fascinated by that one because I think that Atletico have been so good, and I think if they finish second and go above Real Madrid, I can officially take the increase in the price of that stock that I bought of them. It was cheap stock because they were terrible at the time, and they were obviously out of
They,
every
they
competition.
were
But I'm
like
just like, you know
six.
what?
They were like sixth as well, like behind Sociedad
Yeah,
and
they were fighting.
Betis.
They were fighting for that
Yeah,
top four for a while there. Yeah, but I just saw signs that I'm like, you know what? Simeone looks like he's fighting to stay at this club, and then I'm like, I'm going to buy a bit of stock. They got good players. If they're a settled team, they're a good team. Marcus Llorente continues to be fantastic, and Antoine Griezmann is the key man. And I'll be shocked, even though Atletico have had a disappointing season, I'll be shocked if he doesn't make one of my three teams because that's how damn good he's been since he could play 90 minutes for Atletico. He's been unreal. Um, I think, yeah, let's go to Germany. Man, oh man. Talk about teams that I've already formed my opinion of whatever they do. Bayern and Dortmund are those teams for me. Let's start on Dortmund. Dortmund have given us the most incredible games this season. There's absolutely no doubt about it. They are cruising to. Let me remember. I think it was 3-1. They might have been 3-0 up. No, they were
let me
2
have a
0 up.
look.
No, they were 2-0 up. I remember it. 2-0 up and
Yeah,
a
they were
man
2
up.
0
A man up after, I think, 20 minutes. And honestly, I thought the start of the game, I'm like, man, Dortmund, they're just not solid. They had to start with Chan and Hummels at the back. Hummels then had to go off. Koulibaly had to come on. Koulibaly makes a terrible mistake at the end of the
Koulibaly.
game.
Do they have a Koulibaly as
Yeah,
well?
not that cool. Koulibaly with a C. He makes a terrible mistake to give Stuttgart the equaliser after Dortmund had scored in the 92nd minute with Gerrard. And my note was, it's like there's got to be something positive for Dortmund. So I'll say is like, you know how Liverpool last season they had sort of these. I think the analogy used was like a geothermal rock pool where they had like pressure coming to the top for different players at different times. Like if Luis Diaz went off the boil a bit, Diogo Jota played well, and if Mo Salah wasn't playing well, Mane was playing well. So Dortmund definitely have that in the attacking areas. Sebastian Haller scores. in this game. Adeyemi's had some hot spells this season. Marco Royce comes in and out. I didn't put Julian Brandt in there because I think he's been consistently good. But ultimately, they let this one slip, and they'll be asking. I think. Okay, here's the story out of Germany because I think it's a tale of who deserves who deserves to win the title less. And what I mean by that is I think the karma gods are against Bayern, and I think the footballing gods are against Dortmund. Because I swear Dortmund don't deserve some of the results they get. But maybe both of those gods, set of gods, spoke this weekend because Dortmund did not get their win against Stuttgart, despite being up a man as well as 2 goals. And Yusufa Moukoko, after Gio Reyna scored the goal in stoppage time, sort of screamed in the goalkeeper's face. And I don't like seeing that when that happens. So that was a bit of karma for that one. But in terms of Bayern, it's got to be the karma gods because of what they did to Nagelsmann and how they've run their whole operation despite being on track for all the things they wanted, and now they are in jeopardy of not winning any of them. Not one. Can you fathom a world where Bayern Munich don't win a trophy for a season? It's impossible to comprehend. We're so
I wonder
used to it.
when the last time that's happened, where they didn't even win like a German cup because they're out of that one.
I
So
know.
when's the last time they've missed out on 100% of everything?
I wonder if Klopp did a double in his time when they were winning.
Yeah, I imagine he did.
But was that no? Because Bayern won the treble, so yeah, well, you'd have to look. It's at least 10 years because obviously they've won the Bundesliga
10 years in a
10 years
row.
in a row. So there is a chance that happens. There is a chance that karma speaks. And honestly, the way they're playing under Tuchel, and I know I wasn't a fan. I can't have it. I know I can't have it both ways because I called Nagelsmann's football a little bit too gimmicky for me. But honestly, Bayern under Tuchel, it's been a while. It's nearly been a month, and they were so boring and basic against Hoffenheim, sort of like they were against Manchester City. And I'm just like, yes, for the most part, I like basic with good players. But this is boring. Like, what are you doing? Like, is there anything to it? Are you stimulating? Are you starting to stimulate the players in any way, or is it just 4-2-3-1? Let's go and see what you can do, lads. Because I don't think the evaluation process should take this long, especially because that's Bayern Munich. You're able to watch them week in, week out. You should have a really good idea of what these players do. But I don't know if Tuchel's shown that he really does, given that it's taking this long and given what he produced against Manchester City, because you've got to think you've been able to watch Manchester City all year as well and see what they're doing, and you came up with nothing, no kind of game plan against them. So I don't know, maybe Bayern will have the footballing gods against them as well as the karma gods pretty soon if they don't start producing better performances. And you know what? I know I said after the Der Klassiker that I didn't think Dortmund could win it. Bayern are just leaving me so cold. I think Dortmund they could win it, and I think it will be somewhat justice, somewhat injustice. So this is a title I want to see neither of these teams win, to be quite honest. And I don't know. I'm fascinated by it, but I'll be annoyed by whatever result we get from the Bundesliga because yeah, it's just annoying. And the top three in Germany failed to win this weekend, with Union not being able to win their game either. Which admittedly I wasn't going to pain myself by watching Union Berlin. I love the story. I don't necessarily love the football for the most part, so I'm sorry. I apologize. But Leipzig. But the big winners from this top four race are Leipzig and Freiburg because they were able to win their games. None of which, even if I wanted to watch, which I'm not sure I do, but even if I did, I could watch because couldn't find them anywhere. But you've got to say the big losers this weekend have to be Leverkusen for me because they weren't able to win their game. And if they were able to win their game, they would be shaped up to go into the Leipzig clash only 5 points behind. And you got to think if they win that, then they are right back in the top four race. But as it is, they're still clinging on. They must beat Leipzig next weekend to have any hope. They must sort of get out of this bit of malaise because they weren't very good in the Europa League against Union Saint-Gilloise at home either. So they're just hitting a little bit of a wall, probably at the wrong time. Can they get out of it in time? They've got two massive games back to back this week for Leverkusen to see if they can have a somewhat relevant season or if they'll just peter out. But again, I'm not going to change my opinion on them because Xabi Alonso looks to have them in the right direction. They have got talent. Maybe not being in the limelight come the end of the season means that the bigger clubs in Europe don't come in for that talent. We'll see. But yeah, if they can maybe build on it, not lose any players over the summer, then yeah, I'm not going to change my opinion on Leverkusen, even though for the most part they've been bitterly disappointing this season because you've got to think on quality of that team. They've got to be a top four team. So at least there's an upturn, but for what they did at the start of the season, they're kind of no higher than they deserve to be. And I guess it is a full 34 game season in the Bundesliga, so they're running out of time as well. And then finally in France, PSG wrapped up the title this season. 8 points clear of Marseille. Marseille have overtaken Lens into the second. The Lens PSG game was somewhat ruined, somewhat by Abdul Samid for the tackle, but somewhat by the referee. I don't know if it had to be a red card. Do we have to crush maybe the biggest occasion of the French season or of the Ligue 1 season? Maybe not. I don't know. He shouldn't have made the tackle, so I'm torn. But after that point, there wasn't much to watch except for the third goal, which was an unbelievable Mbappe left-footed backheel into Messi's path. Messi finished it, and that was a moment of pure genius. It was lovely to watch, but the rest, not really much to watch. Lens sort of a little bit capitulate after getting a man sent off, and they just couldn't. It was a bridge too far going away to PSG. If it stayed 11-11, it would have been an interesting match, but given that it didn't pan out to be that way. And yeah, Monaco, I think only 2 points behind Lens now, so that race for top three is definitely there as Marseille and Monaco both win their games. I'll be interested to see how that pans out. I really hope Lens don't finish outside because I think they've been really good, really consistent this season. Definitely the team I've been most impressed with out of France. So I hope they don't fall out. I can't remember if they have Monaco in the run, and if they do, that'll be a huge game. That'll be a fun one to watch. But yeah, I think that's the wrap of Europe.
They do. They have them this week.
This week, exactly.
This week coming.
That's awesome. That's a big game. Hopefully, we'll get repaid for the tedious week of football we had to endure this week with some bigger fixtures next week and maybe a Champions League surprise or two. Although I'm not holding my breath in those games those ties where we think it's done, which gives us a transition, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we spoke about it in detail last week. You'd say that 3 of those games are pretty much wrapped up?
I would, yes.
Yeah, considering...
All right, what... The over-under is 0.5 of a shock. So, like, 1 or more or 0 or less. What are you putting your money on? Do you think we get at least one shock out of those 3?
I don't think so, considering Inter... It seems they did sort of play a full-strength team almost on the weekend, though, so they didn't really rest players. But
key ones, I think it was Lautaro, but Barella played.
Yeah.
Brozovic didn't play, which was big news.
It almost seemed like it was like maybe 7 or 8 out of their starting 11 that played.
Yeah, that's what Juve and Inter sort of did. But there were a couple, like the ones they did rest were pretty key players.
Yeah.
As well.
But I imagine since they're also playing at home as well, they should get the result. Chelsea, because you can't get a tune out of them, so I'd be shocked if Chelsea can turn this around.
I'm with you on that.
But you know what? Just because they're playing at home...
Bayern. They're the ones you would, if you had to say.
No, actually, I wouldn't... I'd be shocked, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Chelsea managed to get because 2 goals at the end of the day, it's not that hard, and they can maybe they can pull out a Liverpool type performance where they just pull out something completely unpredictable. But I 90% of me says I can't see it happening, but that 10% is considering the players that they have, the abundance of talent that they have within their ranks. But yeah, that one, it would shock me, but it wouldn't shock me at the same time. If you get where I'm coming from. Bayern, no, they're not.
Yeah, which one do you think is the most plausible?
For a shock.
Yeah, for someone to overcome it.
Probably Chelsea.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think I land on that for your reasons. I think, but it would be tight between them and Benfica.
Because the thing is, you can write off the team, but you can't write off the players.
Yeah.
So
and the fact that they're at home, and the fact that Real Madrid have been known to leak goals, they can do it, but you have to get very lucky with them not scoring enough to go through.
Yeah, and also considering the way that Kroos and Modric play, you'd be surprised of them having a bad game against Chelsea in this type of form.
Yeah, and N'Golo Kante gave Modric a lot of problems
for the first 10-15 minutes.
Yeah, at the Bernabeu, but the problem is, while Real Madrid may leak goals, Chelsea do not score.
That's the other thing, yeah.
Oh man, they do not. So yeah, I think that's right. If I had to if I was given $100 to put it on, I would put it on 0. I don't think any of these teams are overcoming, but at the same time, I'm kind of tempted to put it on 1 because, I don't know. I would kind of been surprised if, at least one of these doesn't do it. But at the same time, I wouldn't, because logically, why the hell would they? There's no reason. Maybe Benfica is the team where you could maybe believe in them a bit, but Inter were pretty comprehensive when they went to the Stadium of Light. So given that they have to go to the San Siro, given Champions League Inter this season have been a different team to League Inter, and yeah, given on the Bayern side, I guess, which was what we'll get into, given how uninspiring, I know they held their own for a while before the Rodri goal, so maybe I'm being too harsh on them. But yeah, given how uninspiring I found them in the first leg, I just think there has to be a complex there with City. They have to think that City are too good for them. I don't think Bayern will be going into that game believing that they can turn it around. If they believe that they could turn it around, then you'd have to give them a little chance at the Allianz. A team like Bayern Munich with the pedigree they have.
I don't see it happening. And considering Pep knows that crowd, that stadium, that ground, yeah, I don't see it happening. In hindsight,
but only
in hindsight, I think Nagelsmann would have gotten a better result in the first leg if he stayed.
It's an easy one to say, but I tend to agree with you. I actually think the point we kind of touched on in the preview where I said they lost their advantage if they wanted to out-intense Manchester City, I think that's kind of come back to bite them on the bum. And that's where I think that they could, with Nagelsmann, have done better, because I actually think Bayern Munich were maybe the best matchup to beat Manchester City this year in the Champions League. Look, the thing with Real Madrid will be, and I know I'm already looking ahead to the semi-final, and given what we've just said about these 3 ties, we're kind of somewhat right to do it. Maybe one of them will make us look stupid, but we'll see. If they do, go for it, because they'll be an epic night of football, so whatever. But I think in the semi-final, the challenge will be putting to bed those ghosts of last year, because Manchester City was so close to the final. They were so close to sort of meeting their destiny, meeting Liverpool, which was kind of how last season was meant to end. Those 2 teams were the best teams.
It felt like that was
Europe.
Supposed to be the climax.
But Real Madrid said, no, actually, it's our divine right to win this competition. What do you think you're doing? They said that to Liverpool and Manchester City, and Yeah, they were so close. Two Rodrigo headers in stoppage time out of nowhere because City were cruising.
Mm.
Remember in that semi-final, it was one of the more comfortable performances anyone put in against Real Madrid, and there were a few teams who looked like they were comfortable against Real Madrid last season until they did the Real Madrid thing in the Champions League. So, yeah, I think it'll be all about the mental demons when they meet Real Madrid. But I thought in terms of the actual matchups on the pitch, I thought Bayern was the best matchup, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go back to it. I think Tuchel fucking ruined it, man. I think he ruined, and I'm super disappointed that he didn't come up with anything in the first leg that was sort of suggested that he had a coherent game plan to expose weaknesses and nullify strengths of Manchester City. They sort of 4-2-3-1. You're all good players. You'll hold your own, and sure that worked for a little bit of time, but in the end, it wasn't enough, and it was. I don't know. I don't know if I can blame Tuchel for Upamecano though, but maybe I can because he didn't watch enough of Bayern this season to know that you shouldn't really trust this guy in the biggest moments of your season. Then again, who do you trust in the biggest moments of your season? So Bayern have personality problems. We've been through them, but I think ultimately it's easy to say now, obviously, but. And the other thing as well, the other thing I'll point to why they might have been better off with Nagelsmann is we said it after the second leg against PSG, sort of the way that they weren't impatient with the way, and it just showed that Nagelsmann was continuing to grow because he's 35 years old. He's an unbelievably young person to be an elite coach, and he was just continuing to grow. It was his third season in the Champions League proper anyway. And yeah, I think the season before we saw that he couldn't show that restraint against Villarreal, and a Villarreal team who were probably worse than that PSG team knocked him out. So he grew. He got out of a very tough group, and then he showed signs of maturing as a manager in the way they handled PSG in the second leg. So yeah, to think that was the right time to sack him is why I think the karma gods should rain down on Bayern Munich, and they already somewhat have because, for all intents and purposes, they're out of two competitions that they brought Thomas Tuchel in to win. You've got to think. The more I look at it, maybe it's a long-term plan, but I mean, Thomas Tuchel's not a long-term manager, so I don't get it. I don't understand it, and I'm disappointed in what they've done so far. Maybe I'm being harsh, given he hasn't been there that long, but karma's a bitch.
No, I think I'm on you with that. That I think we're both disappointed, especially with this result, because it's pretty much it's pretty much killed the tie, like the 3-0. Like if it was at least a 1-0 or a 2-0, then you're like, okay, they can turn it around at the Allianz. But also what they've shown in the league doesn't fill you with confidence that they can turn it around. And then also, what's happened with Mane as well? Like, is he suspended by the club, or so? Like
I think he's suspended, fined, and I think they're going to offload him. All reports say they're ready to sell in the summer. What a crazy season for Sadio Mane! Wow.
And weren't we saying at the start of the season that he made the right choice leaving Liverpool and like getting out of Salah's shadow and whatnot?
That's a documentary. That's a documentary right there, man. The Sadio Mane story, how it all culminates in this, and oh my god! Remember, this guy finished second in the Ballon d'Or voting. How the mighty have fallen.
Yeah. I wonder. You know what? Newcastle? Do you reckon?
Interesting.
Do you reckon they could come in for him? Do you reckon he would want to go back to the Premier League, or does he go maybe to Italy or something?
Interesting.
Let's
see
Barca.
what the market is.
Barca.
That's a good one. I like Barca.
That left hand side needs a player.
You know, because I didn't bring this up when we were talking about Spain. You know who looked really good on the weekend? Admittedly, I only watched the mini match again, but he was involved in everything. Rodrigo looked really good, and what was noticeable was Vinny wasn't playing, and he was playing on the left. So I'm starting to wonder, in terms of Real Madrid going forward, do Rodrigo and Vinny work together, or is Rodrigo going to be someone who they look to move on quite soon? I tend to think maybe the latter, especially if they're going to maybe get Kylian Mbappe in sometime soon. I tend to think maybe the latter because I'm always left a little bit cold by Rodrigo on the right. I don't think
He hasn't
he's
put in the
fine.
numbers that Vinny's put in. But you know what? Like, um, I'll relate this to League of Legends actually. So basically, on the map you have 3 lanes, and the thing is, you have like basically a one, and you see you have basically a person in each lane, and then you have like a wandering person. He's a jungler. He comes between each lane, and it's about putting resources. So you put your resources into whatever lane is like the best matchup, the best winning lane or whatnot. So Real Madrid, it's obvious that they put the majority of their resources into the left hand side and Benzema he tends to always float out to the left hand side as well rather than to the right. So that's the resources are being put into the left hand side at the detriment of the right hand side. So has Rodrigo actually been allowed to really flourish, considering that right hand side, even with Valverde there, it's more of a backup side. It's more of that sort of. It probably takes a little bit more of a defensive role, considering the left hand side is so attacking. So that's also the trade off. It's unfortunate for Rodrigo that you can't play 50-50 on each side. You're going to be playing 60-40 or 70-30. It seems more like 70-30 probably, the way that Real Madrid play.
I'm totally with you. I'm not blaming Rodrigo for any of this.
No, neither. Because he does look good. He does look okay.
He's definitely looks okay, and I know he's still a young player, and he's probably a season or two behind the Vinny curve, and he could still get there. But the fact of the matter is, Vinny is at that club, so you're never going to play on the left hand side. And I was struck by how good he looked on the left hand side. So that's just one to watch for me, especially given that there'll no doubt be the Kylian Mbappe rumours circling again this summer. And yeah, Rodrigo, you could get yourself a really good player if you're a club who needs a player like that.
Yeah, so Rodrigo's 22. He turned 22 this year. Let me just see. Vinny.
He's what, 24? I believe.
He's turning 23 in July. So he's a year older.
Vinny's still 22.
He's a year
Just 1 year older. Wow.
Yeah, he's a year older.
Imagine that, being that good at football at that age. Wow.
So,
but yeah, just watch that space. But yeah, I think we're ready to go on to the tie that still remains in the balance. Yeah.
Yeah, Napoli AC.
Yeah, and I'm happy that this tie is the one that remains in the balance, because it means more eyeballs should be on this one, and I think it's deserving. Even though, as we always say, we don't always love the ties between two clubs from the same country. Although sometimes that can be fun, because I don't think anyone will be too disappointed if we get a Milan derby in the semi-final for the drama that could pose. But
I'll cut you off there. Maybe if it was the Milan from last season, because this season they've been a bit under par.
Definitely. But they showed us what they could do last time they went to the Maradona, and they're going back there again tonight or tomorrow morning for us in Australia. And just is it simply the fact of this comes down to how fit and how, well, I wouldn't say how good, but how fit Victor Osimhen is for this game? Is it too simplistic to say that?
Okay, well, he was only out for what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? And what was the actual injury as well?
Adductor, or I don't know. I think it was something to do with a strain.
Yeah, look, I don't think like being out for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I don't think it's long enough to ruin your stride or make you lose any match fitness that you have. So yeah, I don't expect him to be sort of like off the pace or anything like that. If he was out for like 2 months, then I'd be like, okay, this, and like he's making his return, like does a 10-15 minute cameo on the weekend, and then he does his full return against AC. Then I'll be like, okay, this is a little bit of a concern, but considering it's only like 2 weeks, I think this is good for Napoli that it was such a minor injury.
Well, if you're not concerned about that, do you think he will? Do you think he will make the difference then in this second
I think
leg?
he could, but like the bigger concerns would be that
Definitely could.
that Kim is out, and who was the midfielder that's out as
And
well,
Gisa.
and Giza, yeah. So those are probably the bigger concerns, rather than any question marks over Osman's fitness or sharpness.
If I gave you going into the game, you can have Victor Osimhen, unknown health bar. We expect it to probably be high, but maybe, I don't know. What would you put his health and sharpness bar at? Maybe 84, 85%? Something like that. Not quite into the 90s.
Yeah,
Or you can have Anguissa and Kim Min Jae back, but you
I'll
get no Victor
take
Osimhen.
Osman.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
100%
I'll
me
take
too.
Osman.
So ultimately, I think Kim is probably a bigger loss than Anguissa, but they're both pretty big losses. They have been good players for Napoli, really good players for Napoli this season, in fact. Uh, but Victor Osimhen is the main man. He gives the unpredictability. I thought, as good footballing wise, I thought as Napoli were in the first leg, they didn't create enough threat. So being able to have Varane and Osimhen to deal with, I think, is a totally different proposition. Milan haven't had to face Victor Osimhen this season at all. Because if you think of the game earlier in the season, they didn't play, and the last two meetings he obviously hasn't played. So he definitely is good enough and has been good enough to make the difference, despite Kim and Anguissa not being there. But he has to. You really feel. Does he have to? Maybe he doesn't have to. Maybe he can bring enough pressure to him and collapse the defense enough that Kvaratskhelia might get more time to shine, and it could be him to make the difference. But you've got to expect it'll be one of those two. You also will need Lobotka to finally get a hold of Brahim Diaz and stop him from opening up these games, because in the last two meetings it's been a Brahim Diaz sort of breaking a press to open up the game, and Lebock has been involved in both of those presses. So he needs to, I would say, be more of a presence. It's hard to say given a guy of his stature, but given the Brahim Diaz isn't this physical specimen either, he needs to get him under wraps. He cannot let him get loose again, because he's been massive. Milan are obviously rested. All the outfield players are coming in as fresh as you can expect, given the point of the season. They also come in, you know exactly what Milan's mentality is, because they've clearly prioritised trying to win this tie and win this competition, even to maybe the detriment of their top four hopes, which is crazy for me to think, actually. I would have thought you'd still have to be fighting on both fronts, but their sort of brazen approach to just saying we don't care about the top four. We're going all out to beat Napoli in the Champions League. I don't know. Will it pay off? You've got to think it couldn't have been detrimental to them to not play on the weekend. So yeah, they'll come in pumped. They'll come in with confidence that they've already won at the Maradona. And like I say, I don't like the signs for Napoli going into this. I don't like the feeling, the vibes. But like I also say, I can see them coming through this tie if Victor Osimhen is fit enough to carry them through. And if they do get through this tie, I would put them very close to being favourites to win the whole thing. Because I think if they come through this, they will feel like they can come through anything. Because Milan sort of, barring that game earlier in the season, have had the wood on Napoli in recent times. And this, you've got to think, is the brink for Napoli, because they're without two key players. They're a goal down in the tie. They've already been battered 4-0 on this pitch just 2 weeks ago. This has to be right on the brink, and it's up to Napoli if they survive this or if they fall off. But if they survive it, only Manchester City I'd put above Napoli as favourites to win the competition.
Yeah, considering their current form, it seems like Napoli's slightly fallen off a little bit.
Yeah, they've won the league and they don't care. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
but I still expect Napoli to get through this tie. But
Maybe you're right.
but
Unless,
you know what though, like
yeah, go.
if you because you're putting City favorites, you know what? I actually think that Real Madrid are going to make the final. I just think
And
that
for me,
they have the experience, they have the club as the aura of the club in the Champions League as well. They have that behind them. But if City do beat Real Madrid, I think they win the whole thing.
yeah, I think most people's favourites will come from the other side. I probably think Napoli would hope if they do get all the way there, and that's a big if, given the position they're in. But if they do get there, they might want to meet Real Madrid because I can't say they're a better version than Real Madrid, but I think they are a slightly younger version of Real Madrid. They're definitely not as intelligent, but they're pretty supremely intelligent, Napoli themselves. And I think the intensity could tell, but maybe not in a final because how much can you really open up and play your game in a final? So finals could go either way. If you've made it all the way to the final,
not to mention like this would be the sixth final for a lot of these Real Madrid players, so they know exactly how to play. Whereas for Napoli, that is their first final. The nerves will definitely be a massive factor there.
yeah, definitely. Given I think if it was a two-legged tie, I'd fancy Napoli a bit more, but we're not going to get to see that unfortunately. But I think it's all going to be a moot point because I think Manchester City are ready to bury those demons, and I think they're ready to beat Real Madrid in the semi-final. But we shall see. It's going to be a classic should we get there, and we expect to get there. But if we don't get there, then we've seen something remarkable along the way. But yeah, definitely that Milan-Napoli tie is the one still in the balance. There a lot riding on it, and I'm very intrigued to see how we come out. The only way I can be happy if Milan come out on top is if they produce something similar to what they did a couple of weeks ago at the Maradona, because that was Milan of last season. They were sensational in that game. But if it's more of Milan like we saw in the first leg, I'll be a little bit bitter if they knock Napoli out, sort of playing that style. But you know, different styles of football win different games, and that could just be a case of that. But yeah, it'll be a little disappointing given for Napoli season to go the way of Barcelona's and sort of fizzle out.
It's yeah, that would be extremely disappointing, especially the way that Napoli have played probably for 2/3 of the season as well. And then pretty much at
Yes.
in the final stretch, that's when they lose form. So, but you know what? I'm predicting a 3-0 for Napoli.
Wow, on a
Yeah.
limb.
I reckon
Oh,
3-0 Napoli. I reckon Osimhen, if he doesn't score, he's at least assisting too.
I hate myself for this. I'm going to go 2-1 Milan.
Ooh, what?
I just don't think it's Napoli. It's going to be Napoli's night. I hate it. But I'm ready to be proven wrong
Yeah.
because I wouldn't be surprised if I'm wrong. And I wouldn't be surprised if you're right with the 3-0 and Napoli sort of go back to early season Napoli and they're just too much for Milan to handle. So, yeah, that is easily the one I'm most excited for. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I don't think we'll bother with
I'm
predictions.
nervous.
We won't bother with predictions for the other ones. We've sort of given them like at least not scoreline predictions. Like we do expect obviously City, Real, and Inter to all go through. Um, yeah. Anything else to add before we sign off?
Nah, a brisk hour and a half, I think, should do it for this week.
Yeah, I
We'll be
think.
back to no doubt talk about the shocks that we saw after we've predicted no shocks. We might get one or two now, so I don't know. We're terrible at predictions. See what
Yeah,
happens.
we'll see. We'll see how we go. Hopefully there won't be any shocks, and then that way we don't have to do 2 hours. We can stick to another hour and a half pod.
I don't know. don't know. The shock will be pretty dramatic. I wouldn't mind watching a shock somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll get the what was it, 2020 semi-finals shocks.
Oh, those back-to-back mornings of football,
No,
my
that was
God.
2019, not 2020.
19, yeah,
Yeah.
19. My God, which one was more remarkable?
Liverpool, I'd say.
I'd have to go with you, but man, the silence after the Lucas Moura goal with the last kick of the game in the Amsterdam Arena was crazy. It was so real when an away team does that, and the fact that that is maybe the greatest hat trick scored in Champions League history.
And then he doesn't
And
get
like it's
rewarded.
Lucas Moura, and there's hardly any mention, and he didn't get picked for the final
Yeah,
because Harry
that's a
Kane was
that's a killer that he didn't get picked up for the final.
those mornings. That back to back semi final run was incredible,
Yeah, like you
and
both
the corner.
your jaw is on the floor for both mornings.
Well, I didn't even watch the Liverpool game live because I was so sure we were out of the competition.
You
There was
fool,
no,
you
we didn't
fool.
have Mo, and we yeah, I know. Who are we missing, Mo? And I'm tempted to say, did Sadio play?
I can't remember
I
at
don't
this
think he.
point. I don't think.
Yeah,
I
I
have a
don't
feeling
think
he
he
might not
did.
have.
But we had Divock.
Yeah,
That's all that
yeah,
mattered on the
yeah. Out of
and
Origi.
Genie. Genie had 2 goals as well.
Yeah,
But imagine being Barcelona and conceding in that manner to lose the tie, 4-0.
and that was like
Oh,
an informed Barca as well.
that was like I keep saying, that was the last great Messi season for me. The last great Messi Barcelona. Rakitic was on top form. Ernesto Valverde was managing well. Busquets was still playing well. Yeah, they were a good team. It was definitely that was the final for me. Those two, and oof, we came through it.
Just thanks to Dembele missing that 1-on-1 in the first leg.
And yeah, I know. And thank God we got those semi-finals because the less said about the final, the better. Oof. That was a rough morning of
I
football.
I
It
had a
was,
fe- I
thank
had a
God
feeling
Liverpool won it.
I
It
had a
was
feeling once it
horrible.
was two English sides, I'm like, this is gonna be a horrid watch. Like if it was at least Ajax Liverpool that season would have been a nice game to watch.
Yeah.
It actually would have been very nice. But oh well, we got the crap that we got. The footballing gods
Um,
weren't nice to us for the final.
it was crap, but Liverpool won, so I'm not
Yeah,
complaining.
well, I was a neutral, so I don't really care. Technically, I was a neutral. Anyway, Caleb, it was a pleasure. Hopefully, it was a pleasure for all our listeners if they got through this hour and a half. And we'll be back in a couple of days' time. And make sure you like, subscribe, comment on any things that you agree or disagree with. And yeah, hopefully get some good games tonight and tomorrow. So yeah, Caleb, see you when I see you. To everyone else, thanks for coming and bye for now.